California in Focus.
Welcome to California in Focus. I'm Assemblyman Kurt Hagman. Today we're here with Alan Milliken, the Chief Actuary for CalPERS. First of all, define a couple of things. What is CalPERS?
Well, thank you for inviting me. CalPERS is the California Public Employees Retirement System. We provide pension and health benefits to state employees, school employees, and local members of local agencies, employees of local agencies who contract with us to provide those benefits.
And the Chief Actuary means you have to look at the numbers all the time to make sure that either we have enough, we could do long-term planning, right? You're a big planner for the future.
Yes. Yes, my essential part of my job is to take a look at basically make some assumptions about what's going to happen in the future and then figure out how much we need in the way of contributions in order to fund those benefits today rather than waiting until they come due.
Now, I'm sure each employee sectors have a different kind of maybe a contract, but in general, is it like part the employee pays, part the employer pays into a fund, and that fund gets invested, and with the investments and return on that, the returns when someone retires is kind of what helps pay for things? Is that how it works? Or
That's how most public sector pension plans work. In the private sector, employee contributions to defined benefit plans are very rare. But in the public sector, it's very, very common to have employee contributions as well as employer contributions.
So they're both.
They're
and
both.
Depending on the contract, it could be more of one or the other, or are they pretty much standard, or they're different for each contract?
It's within California, the Public Employees Retirement System, the member contribution rates are effectively defined in legislation. So they're the same for all employees in the same categorization.
Okay, and what are they?
So for most state miscellaneous workers, we contribute 8% of pay to the pension system. For local agencies, it will either be 7 or 8% of pay, depending on their specifics. It's 6%, I believe, for school employees.
So that's how much the state kicks in for percentage of their pay, and does the employee also pay in that 6 or 8?
No, that is the employee contribution
Okay.
I was quoting. By the way, public safety employees generally have slightly higher contribution rates. The contribution for the employer is determined by the actuary, by my staff essentially, although for the state it's actually set by the board. On my recommendation.
Okay, so when I'm an employee, I'm paying 8% of my pay in. You know what I'm supposed to receive during retirement. You know what it should cost. You can tell the state how much to put in to make sure that number's there.
That's correct. We also take a look at what the current level of assets in the particular plan. We actually track the assets by plan.
Okay, and over the years, I've heard even in the past that the fund was doing so well. There were some holidays for a while where the state didn't have to contribute anything, and then now we hear a lot in the news that we're way behind. I'm sure it has a lot of factors to it, but what's your take on where we're at right now, and how do we, basically the more historical look, what has changed so much?
The biggest factor in terms of the funding levels recently has been the rather poor performance of the markets, investment markets over the last decade. They have significantly underperformed the historical average over the last decade, and that's reflected in the funded status, since those investment returns are very important to the funding of the system.
Is there other structural factors? So if we have a good 10 years, you think we'll right side up, or one of the things I'm hearing is that we're living longer, for example. When 30, 40 years ago, the average life expectancy was 68, and now we're hearing it's up to close to 80. Those 12 years extra in retirement's got to be a burden on the system as well, somewhat. Is that one of the factors, or?
Life expectancies are increasing. Our mortality assumption is based on basically currently up to date. Mm-hmm. So it's not like we're using a really out-of-date mortality table for the funding of the system. However, we are looking at potentially including some projected mortality improvement into our actuarial basis. And so we will actually start pre-funding for future mortality improvements.
So you just change your formulas each year to try to keep up with the new data you have.
That's what we've been doing historically. What we're looking at now is, instead of changing it as it goes along and shows up, we're going to start predicting it. And that means we may overpredict or we may underpredict, but the changes should be smaller in the future because we're already incorporating some level of mortality improvement. That has not happened yet. Looking at that probably in spring of early 2014 is when we're next scheduled to go to the board with our actuarial assumptions.
When we have, I know in our budget process, we have to allocate some general funds toward, the state portion of this matching. And I've heard that those, we're not paying enough into it. Can you kind of give us an assessment where we are today to fully fund our obligations to our state employees who deserve to have their retirement?
Right. At the moment, we're about 70% funded, slightly higher as of June 30th, 2011, probably slightly below that on June 30th, 2012. So we are a bit behind on the funding of the system, and again, that's primarily due to what's happened in the markets. We will be gradually increasing the contribution rates. We do try to make sure that we don't have sudden changes in the rates. We want to allow employers to react in budgetary terms. But we are providing employers with a lot of information about what's coming up in the way of contribution rate changes.
So that 30%, if you had to put a number on that, today's dollars, if we said, okay, we have all this money in the world, we want to fully fund where we're at, because I've heard different numbers on that too. What would you say that would be close to?
Well, that 30% is across the system, and the state's really only responsible for about 40% of that. So I don't have a convenient number handy on what the state would have to contribute in order to fully fund their share of the system. But it would be more if you're talking, schools would also be looking at, do we need to ask them to fully fund their piece?
Numbers been thrown out anywhere from a couple $100 billion on up to more than that even. Is that in the realm of what we're looking at, or?
It's not that high.
Okay.
It's quite a bit less than that, but it is certainly at least tens of billions of dollars, approaching $100 billion for the whole system.
Okay, great. As you see things like healthcare, I know I have a couple private small companies too that I try to give full healthcare to my employees. It's gone up the last decade too. That's got to be a huge expense, especially for retirees as well. What have you seen in those regards of healthcare and those benefits?
Well, I'm not an expert on the healthcare side of it. I'm primarily working on the pension side of things. I know that our executive and our board are spending a lot of time and attention on healthcare. We've done some really innovative stuff that to try to control the increase in the health care costs. But it is a problem that exists that's far beyond just the state of California.
Sure, it's national issues.
And so we're trying to move things in that regard, but our ability to affect a national trend is somewhat limited.
And obviously, this is not just a statewide problem. This is a local city issues too. We've seen some major cities in the last few months have to go through different structural changes or ballot initiatives to change. And so this is not just a statewide problem. This is all the areas because of the economy, because of these other factors we talked about that the leadership needs to address one way or the other. Do you see or have any suggestions for the legislature of how proactively we can work with the board and others to make sure that we're protected long term?
Well, you're right. This is not just a state issue. It's also very much affecting local agencies. And there is a difference between the state, where the legislature sets the benefits, and the local agencies, where they select the benefits for their members from a menu that is provided by the legislature. We try to provide the local agencies with all of the information that they need to make good decisions about their benefits. But of course, they're limited by the menu of benefits that is available.
So maybe broaden that and have some more choices for local and for the participating members to keep it within their budgets.
That might be something that the legislature might want to consider.
Great. Well, I thank you very much, Tom, for for everything you do for us to try to keep our balances in check here. It's got to be an uphill battle sometimes. These tough economic times, the job be easy when you don't have to worry about those downsides. But we appreciate that, and thank you for sharing your insight today. And we're going to cut quickly to a couple of the interviews we had from the local municipalities to see what they're doing too as well. So we'll check that out too.
Thank you.
Kathy Miller is the Vice Mayor of the City of Stockton. Welcome, and thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
Today we want to talk about what the state is facing on a large level, but the City of Stockton is also facing, and that is benefits and pensions for our workers, either state workers or in your case the city workers. And the City of Stockton has gone through, and it's been in the news a lot for the last year or so, and going through a lot of budget problems, as like all of us are. And you're actually taking action though. Your council has made a path to try to get out and back your fiscal house back in order. So can you kind of explain a little bit what you're doing on the council and what your council members have decided to do for the City of Stockton?
You bet. We passed in 2010, this council was, almost all of us were brand new. And we passed a plan for fiscal sustainability for our city. And we said as a council, as a policy matter, that every decision we made was going to support that plan, and it was going to be about open, transparent, fair, market rate, total compensation packages for our employees.
And you inherited a budget deficit, I assume, or at least go in that direction when you came into office.
Yes, in 2008 was when the city budget began to be very stressed. Furloughs were implemented right before we took office, and it went steadily downhill from that point.
Okay, so you're talking about having to structurally change the way you compensate and hire employees, whether that to be public safety or your
Yes.
general city workers. And a lot of things we hear about is pension reform. That's a key word we use in Sacramento all the time, and we've been talking about, we haven't done anything in Sacramento about it yet, but pension reform. So in what case, what did you start off with your pensions here for your workers, and what have you proposed at this point?
Well, I think part of the frustration that the public has is they want things to happen really quickly. And when you're dealing with public employees, you're dealing with a lot of different labor contracts, and things don't happen quickly. And not all contracts are open, and so you have to be very methodical in terms of how you tackle it. One of the points that we decided was we were no longer going to approve any multi-year contracts. We were going to get to the point where all of our labor contracts expired the same year, especially public safety, because what had happened was one bargaining unit got a little bit of something in their contract, and then we had a Me Too situation where every other bargaining unit, Me Too, and it slowly ratcheted its way up. And we also had a situation where our base salaries were artificially stated very low, and instead over the years we added a whole bunch of additional pay categories, especially in public safety.
And then you have the overtime, and
Yes.
you have all this other things combined. So your costs, what you have to look at as a council is you look at your cost per police officer, your cost per fireman, your cost per
Yes.
city service, which includes their regular pay, their overtime, their health benefits, and their retirement.
Everything.
And I saw some of the retirement numbers that if you had to fully fund the existing workers, it was like in the 400 million deficit range or something like that. And that at some point, if you didn't make corrections, you were paying more out for the retirees' benefits than you were paying for the current hires, right?
Well, one of the things that happened was in the 1990s, at the same time pension enhancements were coming to the forefront, and cities, following the state, were starting to enhance pensions, which allowed public employees to retire earlier at a higher pension. Stockton also gave retirees health care benefits. And our health care plan, it was not a Cadillac plan, it was a Lamborghini plan. We had employee and a spouse free medical care for life. And that was a benefit that was granted. There was no cap on it, there was no dollar amount. We didn't require them to be a member of a certain plan. It was just go see whatever doctor you want to see and send the bills to the City of Stockton.
Wow. And that is not uncommon for a lot of municipalities, especially for the public safety. They got the big enhancements in the late 90s for 3 or 30. That's every 3 years, or every year you get 3% of your retirement, up to 90% of your full pay.
If you retire on a medical, you could cash out for 100% of your pay for life. And so when you look at the private sector equivalents, which is, it's hard to compare in public safety regards, but for other services, we do sewer or landscaping or things like that, it's really not comparable. And then you had the combination of those coming up and
Yes.
getting bigger, the downturn in the economy, which is global, and all these things factoring in, it put Stockton in a position where you have to
Correct.
consider file bankruptcy, and you're actually going through that process
Yes.
of discovering whether you need to do that or not right now. And what we saw just recently in the primary elections, we saw other cities taking formidable steps, big cities, San Diego, San Jose, also taking steps with voters, with the voter initiative ballots, but 2/3 of voters saying, we want these reforms on the ballot. Or we want to take the cities to take these reforms because these are not sustainable anymore for the cities to pay for them. And you have to make the decision. Do you pay for your personnel? You pay for services, landscaping, you keep your street potholes clean, all the things we take for granted as
Exactly.
residents really happen here at the local level, and you guys have to hear from your residents both ways. How do you see it going here from the future?
Well, Stockton already took steps 2 years ago. We put a ballot measure and won that revised our charter to remove some special protections, including binding arbitration from our fire department. That helped us get a handle on our realigning our budget so that we didn't have to lay off any more police officers. However, part of our sustainability plan is to halt pension spiking. In Stockton, pensions were based on single last year of employment.
So let's go through pension spiking. For us, we know what
Yes.
that means, but that when someone gets promoted or gets puts all his retirement and vacation pay into the last year of service, that last year of employment may be much higher. So if they're making $60,000 a year, it could be as much as 120, almost double what it used to
Easily.
be with the overtime, with the vacation pay, and all the credits they accumulated over 25, 30 years with their service. They can shove it all in 1 year, and all of a sudden that artificially sets to the very top level of their pay for their whole career, and that's what you get retirement on, percentage of that last.
Exactly, and then you have to consider for a firefighter, the average firefighter is only scheduled for maybe 11 days a month. Who needs to take vacation? You can trade shifts with people. You never have to really take that full vacation. So and it's
They get paid.
unlimited. They can roll it over for years and years and years. So the last year when they cash out, even if you're in a city where you take the average of the 3 highest years you earn, it can easily add 20 to 30% to the pension in the end. And as we have seen in the last few years, if PERS has a problem with their investments and they take a large loss, that's not absorbed by the retirees, it's not absorbed by the pension system. That bill is passed back down to the cities.
For those who, yes. And we've done a horrible job of managing those dollars. In fact, in the good years, we did have a stock boom and we did have good investments.
Yes.
They actually gave pension vacations for people not to pay in. And now all of a sudden, we're very, very behind in the state. Crazy with our pensions as well. I also noticed that you put some of your employees on like a 501k type of program, or some of the new hires that you're going to have. So they're not necessarily pensions per se, they're more what we would see in the private sector type of retirements, where the city matches and
Correct.
brings in how much percentage in with them, and they put their own retirement way so they can manage their accounts. And one of the things we saw in our numbers as well, and this is part of the factor of these pensions costing so much, is it's a kind of good thing, but people are living a lot longer.
Yes.
So the actuarial tables that we had from 30 years ago, when we averaged life was to late 60s, and now we're up to 82, so almost a 15-year swing. So you can literally
Exactly.
have people working for 30 years, starting at 25, working to 55, and then actually retire for more time than they were actually working.
And then you have to factor in what's happened in the healthcare industry. When a lot of these pensions came into play, healthcare costs have been relatively flat with a very small annual increase. Well, we've seen what's happened in the market. It's been double-digit
Yes.
increases. So you've got this double whammy. People are living longer. The cost of their health care is going up double digits every year. And in many instances, cities did not put any cap on the city's contribution for these things. And so all of this has led to, it's a true crisis. We have cities that are going under.
Yes, and you're taking steps for that. And I just want to applaud your courage and your fellow council members and mayor. And
Thank
I
you.
understand they all did, came back alive after the last election.
We did.
So the residents support your actions, obviously. And I think that one of the big things is to communicate with them, give them the real fair
Absolutely.
story, what's going on, be honest, let them know what the story is, they'll support you. And you did very courageous on your council as well. I wish we
Thank
had
you.
that at the state level. We haven't done that yet. But I want to thank you for coming out and explaining the situation with us, and
You bet.
keep on
Thank
the good
you.
work here
Thanks
for the
for
city of
having
Stockton.
me.
They're
Thank you.
very fortunate to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, welcome back to California Focus. I'm here with Jan Goldsmith, who's the city attorney for the city of San Diego, also a former judge and a former legislator. And San Diego thank you very much for being here and explaining the San Diego story for what we're doing. One of the topics is that we're facing up and down the state is the city's trying to deal with their pension and health benefits for both their current employees and the retirees. And just recently, in the last couple of weeks, we had both the city of San Bernardino file for bankruptcy, Mammoth, Stockton, the largest one in history to ever file for bankruptcy. But San Diego was facing some of the same crises at the time, but you guys took a little bit different. And can you kind of first explain where San Diego was?
Yeah, San Diego, like many other cities and governments, gave really, some people call them lavish pension benefits to employees during the good times back in mid-1990s, early 2000s. And the city didn't require contributions, higher level, or even increase its contributions. And so over years, it created an unfunded liability, meaning it can't fund itself. And now we're all having to pay the piper. And cities that don't face up to it are going to go into bankruptcy. We saw it, and we feel we have a responsibility to taxpayers to try to resolve it, and we faced up to it. And we are facing up to it. We began, over 5, 6, 7 years ago, facing up to it. We tried to first stop the bleeding, and that is to end the lavish benefits and bring them down to some reasonable.
And those are for current or past employees?
It's for new employees. The one thing we didn't do is that we've respected the vested rights of our employees and retirees. The California Constitution and the Supreme Court have been very clear. You can't touch vested benefits. And figure it's similar to somebody's house. You don't take away their house. When people work for 20, 30 years, and they put in the money and they contribute time and their own money into a pension plan, and they've been promised this for 20 or 30 years, well, that's what they get. They were promised it. It's fair. And I'm a Republican talking. It's fair. It's a contract and it's a property right. And I'm the head of basically, I would say, the most reform-minded city in our state for pension reform, and I'm going to respect their rights. But there are a lot of things we can do that don't infringe on their rights. And that's where I, as a city attorney, have come in and I've said, hey, wait a second, don't focus on bankruptcy, don't focus on taking away people's vested property rights. Here are a lot of things you can do. Number one, you can end the bleeding for new employees. And so we started off by reducing that lavish plan, and now the voters in June 5 approved, let's do away with defined benefit. We don't want to promise future employees that we're going to pay them a monthly amount. We're going to give them a 401k.
And I want to make sure the viewers know that defined benefit means once you retire, for sure you get X amount of dollars, regardless of how much you made in those 30 years. Like a lot of people get promoted over the years in their position. You start off as a firefighter, you may retire as a chief of a fire battalion. You make a lot more as a chief than you do as a firefighter, and you get a certain percentage of your last few years of paycheck. Versus defined contribution means we're going to put in X amount, match you, and come out with what the returns on that investment is over a period of time.
Right. Defined contribution, no, we're not taking any risk. In a defined benefit where you're promising somebody a set amount per month plus cost of living, the taxpayer is taking a risk. The investment market may really crash. It has once, and it might again and again. We take the risk because we got to make up the difference, and that's one of the reasons why pension obligations of cities has been skyrocketing. So our voters said we don't want to take that risk anymore. We will put money into an account for you, and we'll expect you to contribute something. And like every other person with an opportunity to have a 401k, you will get what you have at the end when you retire, and we'll give you investment opportunities and you make some choices.
we've been working on some of the same issues in the state legislature because California is magnitude, 1,000 times larger than in the biggest cities as far as their unfunded pensions. I think we're up to 500 billion maybe unfunded or more than that in California. We don't seem to have the political will to do what San Diego did at this point. Those plans have been presented but been rejected by the majority in the legislature right now, but we still continue. So it would be nice if the state could do something like this first. San Diego, you have the resources, you have the manpower to be able to work on these things and be able to stand up to some of the pressures you must have faced when tackling this. We talk about pension reform at the state level, or you hear it in the news. There's really two parts then. It's the amount of money people put away for retirement, and then it's also a lot of the health and other benefits they may get for themselves and their family, part of the perks, so to speak. So the pension benefits, we need to basically start new with new hires and set new benchmarks and new limits to keep that control on as the economy goes forward. And the health benefits, I know even 10 years ago was probably 1/5 the cost that it is today, 10 years later. And who knows how the next 10 years unfolds with the new national health care plan and all the rest of it is going to go up or down. But it sounds like you guys tackled the two biggest ones in a pretty fair, legitimate way and obviously the voters supported it too. So we want to congratulate you. I wish we could learn from that in the state level and hopefully take some examples from it.
Well, we've done a lot of other little things where we've tried to figure out ways where we can reduce the cost of the city and also ensure we're not violating anybody's vested benefits. I'll tell you, there's one idea that's come out of Orange County that San Jose is also following, and that was part of our initiative, and that is giving existing employees the option to move over to a less expensive plan. That's very attractive to employees who want more money in their pocket, and it's attractive obviously to the city because our contributions go down. Mm-hmm. And we think that that's part of our plan, but right now the federal government won't allow it.
Really?
The federal government, the IRS, won't allow it. It's got bipartisan support and it's going nowhere. And I just wonder why Obama and his administration won't step in and allow us to have some pension reform that employees want. In Orange County, their unions support that concept. Let's give a choice to our employees.
Takes a lot more pressure off than really folding on bigger issues too.
You know, one thing you can do is you can agree to things. So if there's an employee who says, you know something, I'm paying a lot of contributions of my own to this luxurious pension plan. I'd want to save money, keep it in my pocket, and I'll accept something less. So it's a win-win without stepping on anybody's rights. But the federal government is stopping us there, not the state. I think the state would if they could, but yeah. It's the federal government that's stopping us. And this could be a reform that could really be significant. I think of all the reforms we talk about, the option that came out of Orange County is among the top three. It really will save a lot of money.
Well, obviously there is some solutions out there for us to look as a state. We need a political will. I think what you did in the last primary election really gives some strength to us in the legislature to do the right thing. We need to do it. I know the governor's pushing for some major reforms. The leadership on the Democrat side and both sides have been really resisting. We'll see if we come up with something between now and the end of the year. But thank you again for your leadership in San Diego, and we wish you were back in the legislature with us. I wish you had the circumstances you had back when you were in. And
let me say thank you for your leadership. I know you've been on the other side to give freedom to local governments to solve their problems and trying to get the state to face up to its problem. You're not alone. Those of us on the local level appreciate your work, and eventually you're going to be successful on the state level too. It's either that or the state will crumble.
Yes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, we have those two examples of cities who are taking their methods, their plans to fix their issues on a city basis, and hopefully we can learn from some of those trials and errors and address some of the issues we have in the state. But I want to thank you very much, Alan, for being here today, and thank you for all the work you do for CalPERS.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us for California in Focus.